Should one have to get a government-issued license to marry? If same-sex marriage should be legal, what about multiple spouses? Where, if anywhere, would you draw the line?
Licenses for love, or how we choose to deport ourselves after going to bed or before. Good Lord, what right does anyone have in this bedroom? It doesn't matter what the sex is or how many people may or not be there. Good Lord, no, absolutely not.
Mr. Perry.
Since he answered the first part, I'll answer the second. Where do I draw the line? When you force someone into a relationship. All things consensual should be legal. No one should go to jail for anything unless they cause unjust harm to another person.
Governor Johnson, where, if anywhere, would you draw the line?
Well, initially I said we should get government out of the business of marriage completely. But it turns out that and this was in response to gay marriage and the ability of same-sex couples to marry or marry whomever it is that you love. Get government out of that business. Well, it turns out that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of laws that actually contain the word marriage and that would have to be amended. Hundreds, thousands of laws that would have to be amended as opposed to government recognizing same-sex marriage. One piece of legislation, that was my then support of one piece of legislation.
Mr. Peterson.
I believe in the total separation of marriage and state. The government has no business interfering in private contracts between consenting adults, no matter how many.
Dr. Feldman.
I don't need a concealed carry certificate. I don't need any kind of marriage license. I don't need a marijuana grower's permit. I have a constitution. What I need is a government that honors it and doesn't ask for licenses and permits and certificates for things that are none of the government's business.
I think they like your answer. Mr. Perry, North Carolina passed a law that said as to the public sector, one shall use the bathroom that corresponds with the gender on his or her birth certificate. How do you feel about that law?
My question is, where does Buck Angel go to the potty if he goes into North Carolina? If you don't know who Buck Angel is, and based on the applause, most of you probably don't, so I'll tell you. Buck Angel is a transgender porn star. Buck Angel was born a female. Buck Angel now looks like Adam Kokesh, only more buff. But Buck Angel still has a vagina. The Republicans in North Carolina say that Buck Angel should go to the ladies' room. I think that is wrong.
Governor Johnson.
As governor, I did have the distinction of possibly vetoing more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined. If this legislation would have been put on my desk, I would have vetoed it.
Mr. Peterson.
The problem with socialists is that they confuse the distinction between government and society. If it is a government building, then perhaps there should be unisex. But private property owners have the right to discriminate if they so choose, and that is freedom.
Dr. Feldman.
As a physician, I think it's a very good idea to have two separate bathrooms. One for people who wash their hands and one for people who don't.
Mr. McAfee.
I have traveled extensively, and in much of the third world, people use the bathroom in the street in front of everybody. So from that perspective, I cannot see how anyone could care. I'm sorry. It looks like some bizarre smoke screen to me. I'm suspicious of everything. If we have that much attention on something so trivial, something else is happening behind it. I don't know what.
Let's turn to some general questions about liberty. Governor Johnson, what kind of person would you put on the Supreme Court, and should Congress hold hearings on Obama's nominee?
Congress should hold hearings on Obama's nomination. I think that constitutionally he did his duty, and constitutionally the Congress should do theirs. That said, I always prided myself on the appointments that I made, and I always made it a point to personally conduct those interviews myself. So with regard to judges in New Mexico, vacancies that occurred, I think my reputation is that I appointed really damn good judges. And it was really based on personal integrity, questions that I asked. I would ask the hypothetical: would you administer the death penalty for someone who committed graffiti? The legislature passed the bill. I signed it. The Supreme Court upheld that yes, you could administer the death penalty for graffiti. And here it is. You've got the first case sitting in front of you for graffiti. The guy admits to it. What would you do? Well, a lot of them said, hey, the law is the law. I'd sentence him to death. Some said, well, I don't know. I mean, the best answer of all was, you know what? If I had that situation, I would have to resign because I would believe that unethically that I could not administer that sentence. Best answer, though, they got jobs. They oftentimes got the appointment.
Mr. Peterson, what kind of justice would you put on the Supreme Court, and would you hold hearings, should Congress hold hearings on Obama's nomination?
Yes, Congress should obey the law, but when I am President of the United States next year, let's put my old buddy, Judge Andrew Napolitano, on the Supreme Court.
Dr. Feldman.
I would appoint a justice with a keen mind, a big heart, a stiff spine, and a knowledge and respect for our Constitution. As far as Obama's nomination of a justice, I want to support the Congress's firm right to do nothing. It's the one thing they do well.
Mr. McAfee.
What good can any judge do if our system of law is broken? There exist in America more laws than an average reader could read, reading 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 600 years. Please, why don't we have a budget for law? And every time you throw one in, you have to throw one out. We got by with 10 for thousands of years. So does it matter if we have a broken legal system created by Congress? Jesus could not judge properly.
Right on cue. I didn't know he was in the house. Mr. Perry. Mr. Perry.
Yes, Congress should hold hearings. They should also vote, but I would say vote them down, and not because I want to play partisan politics, but because all of the justices that are being nominated are all horrible statists. As far as who would I nominate for a Supreme Court vacancy, well, there's a great Supreme Court judge in the state of Arizona who is a libertarian, Clint Bolick. He's a co-founder of the Institute for Justice. He would stand up for your liberty, and I would put him on the Supreme Court as soon as possible.
Mr. Peterson, reportedly some 83% of law professors are Democrats. As a libertarian, you must think this has real-world consequences. What are they?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I've never met a damn Democrat that I liked. Let me tell you something. The Democrats are not the problem. It is the belief in the authority of the federal government. In order for us to have a freer society, the problem is not with the two-party system. The problem is with the idea that we are in a left-right paradigm. It's black and white thinking. We cannot always blame the parties for our problems. The problem is the government.
Dr. Feldman, if 83% of law professors are Democrats, is this a problem?
Well, the Democrats have tyrants, they have oppressors, they have demagogues. I assume they have some good people. I think that hopefully those professors have been appointed for a reason, and I'm sure that just like the Democrats and Republicans, once we have a libertarian president, I think we'll hear all across Congress and Senate, that's great, because I always was a libertarian.
Mr. McAfee, reportedly 83% of all law professors are Democrats. How big of a problem is this?
I've been sued over 200 times, so whether they are Democrats or Republicans does not seem to matter to me. I believe that rather they are all the left hand of Satan. My apologies, I can't answer better.
Mr. Perry.
Since I despise Republicans and Democrats equally, I'm not concerned about how many are Democrats. I'm concerned about how many of them are horrible statists. The problem is not the political affiliation of the lawyers or the law professors. It's that we have a system that requires us to have so many lawyers.
Governor Johnson, if 83% of law professors are Democrats, how big of a problem is this?
Well, I think that 83% of all professors are Democrats. And how big a problem is this? You know what? I think libertarians probably agree with those professors about 75% of the time. This is the opportunity we have here to bring together those professors. That's the opportunity we have here to bring together those Democrats along with smaller government. Look, we get to a T in the road when it comes to economics, but if we can agree on so much, you know what? The discussion then opens up to how government is oppressive, to how government is tyrannical, and how we can change to have and actually accomplish lesser government.
Dr. Feldman, if a parent chooses not to send his or her child to school, should the government intervene?
Yes, the government should send some people over there to see what a great job they're doing.
Mr. McAfee.
No, sir.
Mr. Perry.
Can you repeat the question, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you repeat the question?
If a parent chooses not to send his or her child to school, should the government intervene?
Absolutely not. The government should not be concerned about where a child is or is not at any given time. The government should not be running the schools. The government should not be intervening when people decide to let their child walk down the street to go to the playground.
Governor Johnson.
No, the government shouldn't intervene, but what we should have is we should be encouraging educational entrepreneurs to be able to have a crack at being able to educate that child in a way that would suit the parents. I just see an incredible opportunity in this country that has gone unmissed. Look, I think education should be at the state level to start with 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, but the states that are going to show the best practice are when they involve competition for public education that would reach out to this kid and perhaps satisfy the parents in a way that they're currently not being addressed at all.
Mr. Peterson.
For too long and too often, public education has been about indoctrination. No, absolutely not. The government should not. I believe in homeschooling. I do believe in vouchers, and I think that we should have a separation of education and state.
Mr. McAfee, should all drug use be made legal or decriminalized, whether marijuana or heroin? And what do you say about people who argue that if you do that, it would lead to to more rampant drug abuse?
The drug uses remain constant, whether it is criminalized or decriminalized, and all drugs should be decriminalized. I have been in prison more than I'm sure most of you, well, any 10 of you combined, for drug use. So I promise you, that hasn't stopped me, or did not until the age of 38. I've been clean since 38. It did not stop me from using drugs. Nothing will. Neither if it were free would I have used any more. I used as much as my body would tolerate of everything.
Mr. Perry.
I read statutes for fun, and so far I have yet to find the word tomato in any statute. But I don't think anybody here would say that tomatoes are not legal. I think that every substance, whether it be cannabis or crystal meth, should be absolutely as legal as tomatoes. There should not be any regulations on how much you buy, grow, sell, possess, consume, sell to your neighbor, give to your neighbor, throw in the air to land on the ground, wherever it may be. No regulations. Everything should be as legal as tomatoes.
Governor Johnson.
In 1999, I was the highest elected official in the United States to call for the legalization of marijuana. I think that's good news. In 2016, I'm still the highest elected official in the United States to call for the legalization of marijuana, although apparently Bernie Sanders is advocating such, and I think a lot of that has to do with his appeal among millennials. Look, I think when we legalize marijuana, we will take a quantum leap in this country with regard to drug use. If we were to legalize all drugs tomorrow, the world would be a much better place. 90% of drug problems are prohibition-related, not use-related. That is not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that should be the focus.
Mr. Peterson.
Drugs are dangerous. Drugs are dangerous because they're illegal. Drug dealers don't check IDs. When people take drugs, they don't know what they're getting. I believe that if we were to decriminalize all drugs, that we would be living in a safer world. But that's the political issue. The moral issue is that you own your life, you own your body, and you ought to be able to put in it what you please, provided you harm no one else.
Dr. Feldman, should all drug use be made legal or decriminalized, whether marijuana or heroin?
Marijuana should not be legalized like alcohol and tobacco. It should be normalized like caffeine and chocolate. Drug abuse is a medical problem. It shouldn't be a legal problem. If that worked, we should make cancer illegal, diabetes illegal, hypertension illegal, and we would have a much better, safer, healthier country.
Mr. Perry, a follow-up question. If you believe in legalizing all drugs, would you at least make certain drugs illegal for children?
As I said, everything should be as legal as tomatoes. I think people are smart enough to know not to give heroin to a child unless under the direct supervision of a doctor. I don't think that people should go to jail. And again, I'm guessing you're defining child the legal way, not the medical way. And those are two distinct things. But again, people are smart enough to know not to give horrible, horrible things to children. Let's look at Portugal, and I'm going over time because everybody else has. Let's look at Portugal for a second. They decriminalized everything 15 years ago. Drug use, drug abuse dropped drastically. Everybody's safer because they're not afraid to go get help if they need it. Right now in this country, people are afraid to go get help because if they go to the doctor will call the damn cops.
Governor Johnson, would you at least make certain drugs illegal for children?
Well, the reality is that no law is going to pass to legalize drugs unless it contains a provision that children are not allowed to use it. Now, that said, as a parent, I mean, my message to my kids was, look, I'd be naive to think that you wouldn't be trying these drugs. But But the problem with drugs is quality, quantity unknown. It's prohibition. And first and foremost, I love you. I love you both. So if you find yourself in a position of being impaired, whether it's alcohol or drugs of any kind, call me, because I'm going to come and I'm going to pick you up because I love you. And that's what we need to tell our kids, is that we love them.
Mr. Peterson.
The president has no constitutional authority to regulate drugs. That being said, at the state level, I would support some legislation that would stop children from being allowed to purchase drugs and prosecute anyone who would put a child in danger, because I do believe that children need some protection. Yes, you should not be able to sell heroin to a 5-year-old.
Dr. Feldman.
Before we can sell a drug, it has to be tested to make sure it's safe and effective. Congress has a similar mechanism for laws. Before they pass any law, they test it very carefully to see its effect on campaign contributions. If a parent would endanger their child, there's worse problems in that family than drugs. We need to go to the root of the problem, which generally is only made worse by government. There's a lot of problems and a lot of suffering in the world. Adding criminal punishment doesn't help.
Mr. McAfee, would you at least make certain drugs illegal for children?
If a child goes out to buy drugs and the parents don't know they're gone or where they are, there's a problem. If the child has the money to buy drugs, where do they get it? Aren't you missing it? And when the child comes home stoned and you do not notice it, the problem is not with the seller of the drugs. It is with the parents.
Governor Johnson. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 ended discrimination in both the private sector and the public sector. Senator Barry Goldwater voted against it for libertarian reasons. He did not feel it was the government's job to tell a private business owner what to do. Senator Al Gore Sr. voted against it because he opposed integration. If you had been in the Senate, how would you have voted?
I would have voted for it.
No elaboration?
Nope.
You still have more time? Okay. Mr. Peterson.
Can you repeat the question one more time? It was kind of
The
whiny.
Civil Rights Act of 1964 ended discrimination in both the private sector and the public sector. Senator Barry Goldwater voted against it for libertarian reasons, feeling that it wasn't the government's job to tell the private owner what to do. Senator Al Gore Sr. voted against it because he imposed racial integration. How would you have voted had you been in the Senate?
Wait,
I'm sorry?
you're asking whether or not I would have signed the civil rights legislation in 1964?
1964, yes.
Yes, I would have signed.
Which is what you said, right? Mr. Peterson, would you have signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which ended discrimination in both the public and private sectors?
Well, the senator has the power of the filibuster, so I would have filibustered until we abolished Title II, and then we would have gotten rid of the government discrimination.
Dr. Feldman, had you been in the Senate in 1964, how would you have voted on the Civil Rights Act?
I would hope that I would look at it very, very carefully. End government discrimination, and when it came to private discrimination, we need to find what would cause more harm, what would cause less harm, and do what makes life better for people. And that's a very difficult decision.
Mr. McAfee, would you have voted in favor of the 1964 Civil Rights Act had you been in the Senate?
As many of you know, my wife is black, and having spent 3.5 years living 24 hours a day with her, I can assure you that legislation in no way ended discrimination. What it did is bring to the awareness that it is here, but discrimination will not end until you open your heart and your mind and your judgment to a person of another color, another race, another language, another religion.
Mr. Perry.
Allow me to give everyone a history lesson. The segregation in the South was not because necessarily of racist business owners. It was because of racist legislators telling the business owners that they had to segregate the lunch counters. In Virginia, it was business owners that helped the protesters violate the statute by saying, "Come into my business, violate the law." That should have been outlawed. The forced discrimination should have been repealed. That is the only thing the Civil Rights Act should have done.
Mr. Peterson, I have a feeling I know how this answer is going to be. Should someone have to have a government-issued license to drive a car?
Hell no.
Dr. Feldman.
A car is like a gun or anything else. As long as you're using it right and not using it to hurt other people, you should have a right to use it. A license and a permit is just another way to get some money and inconvenience to people.
Mr. McAfee.
I don't think licenses are required. However, if you are under 16 and your parents say you can drive and you haven't done it before, you should put a flashing pink light on your roof at least so we can get out of your way. But that at the most.
Mr. Perry.
The government requires licenses for far too many things. The government requires licenses for people to broadcast radio. The government requires licenses to get married. They require a license to drive. What's next? Requiring a license to make toast in your own damn toaster? Absolutely not.
Governor?
I think government has a basic responsibility to protect us against individuals, groups, corporations, foreign governments that would do us harm. In that context, a license to drive, I'd like to see some competency exhibited by people before they drive. As governor of New Mexico, I vetoed a whole lot of bills. I vetoed the haircutting license. I vetoed all sorts of licensing, but license to drive? I mean, you could, arguably, you could have an insurance requirement, I guess, that then the insurance company would determine. I mean, you got people that are blind that would be on the road, I think, that would actually continue to drive until they hurt somebody. I think.
Gentlemen, we